My name is Lauren. I'm 29 years old, and I'm a registered nurse in a Level 2 Trauma Center emergency department. I've been certified in advanced cardiac life support by the American Heart Association since I was 24. I have worked nights, doubles, holidays, and the kind of shift that ends at 7 in the morning with you sitting in your car in the parking garage, not moving, just letting the adrenaline finish leaving your body before you can drive. I have held the hand of a father who did not make it. I have counted compressions in a language no one else in that room spoke. I have walked out into the gray light of a Tuesday morning feeling like I had just done the most important thing a person can do. 2 months ago, at my brother's lake house on Lake Monroe in southern Indiana, I pulled my 7-year-old nephew out of the water and resuscitated him for 4 minutes and 22 seconds, while my mother prayed out loud and my brother stood on the dock and could not move. 3 hours later, in the hallway of Monroe County Hospital, my mother introduced me to her college friend as our family babysitter. What she did not know, what she could not have known, because she had never once asked, was that the chief of emergency medicine at that hospital had worked a Saturday shift with me 3 weeks before. He was walking down that hallway with a clipboard in his hand and his white coat open at the collar when he saw me, and he stopped. I want you to stay with me through every part of this story. If you have ever been the person your family quietly underestimated, the one they called practical when what they meant was not quite as important, drop the name of your city and the time it is there in the comments right now. Let me know you are here. Let me take you back to where this really started. I was 8 years old when I understood for the first time what a nurse actually did. My grandmother, Ruth, had worked the cardiac floor of Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis for 31 years. She was 62 when she brought me in on a slow Saturday afternoon, the way some grandmothers take their granddaughters to a garden or a bakery. She took me to the nurse's station, and I stood in the doorway and watched her. I watched the way she moved through that space, not checking or hesitating, but certain, economical. Every gesture had a purpose. She looked at a monitor and made a small adjustment and said something to a patient in a voice that was low and steady and completely without performance. The patient visibly calmed. I did not have the vocabulary yet to describe what I was seeing. I just knew it was serious. And without being able to stop myself, I counted the seconds between the beep of the cardiac monitor. 1, 2, 3, 4. I just counted, the way you count without knowing why, the way something in your body does it before your brain gets involved. My mother was in the waiting room. She was an architect, precise and accomplished, and genuinely loving, and she adored my grandmother. But when we got to the car that afternoon, she touched my knee and said, "You have her way with people, Lauren. Not her skill, not her talent, her way with people." Even at 8, something in me caught that distinction. Skill is the thing you built. Way with people is the decorative part, the part that does not require education or discipline or a decade of study. I did not have a word for it at the time. I just filed it away somewhere quiet. My grandmother's watch was a Timex with a silver second hand. She wore it to every shift for 31 years. When she died, she left it to me. Not to my mother, who was her daughter. Not to my aunt. To me. I wore it to my first clinical rotation, and I wore it the morning of the lake party, and I am wearing it right now on my left wrist. And when I am very still or very tense, I find myself counting the seconds without deciding to. The family referred to her career at holiday dinners after she retired as when Ruth worked at the hospital. Sometimes, twice, I heard someone say hospital maid in a tone that was half joking and half serious, which is the worst kind of tone because it gives itself a way out. My mother smiled and changed the subject both times. I sat across the table and counted. When I was 18, my brother Daniel was accepted to Indiana University School of Medicine. He was 25, a year into a post-baccalaureate program our mother had been funding quietly, Not as a favor, but as a matter of course, because he was going to be a doctor, and that was simply what you did. The dinner in his honor was at a restaurant with cloth napkins and champagne. My uncle made a toast. My mother cried. Daniel had worked hard for it, and I am not telling this story to take that from him. 2 weeks later, I told my mother I had been accepted to the nursing program at Indiana University on a full scholarship. She hugged me and said, "Oh, that's wonderful, Lauren. You're going into healthcare too." The way you might say you joined the same gym. There was genuine warmth in it, but there was also a register, a frequency I had been hearing my whole life. The toast was not going to happen. There was a Sunday phone call, a brief embrace, and then the conversation moved forward. I worked at a coffee shop 2 blocks from campus for 2 years to cover my housing. I opened at 5 in the morning and went to afternoon labs smelling like espresso and dish soap. Daniel's apartment was covered by our mother. I want to be precise about this because the arithmetic matters. Not because I am resentful, but because weight shapes posture. And I want you to understand exactly what I was carrying by the time I walked into my first real emergency shift. The training was not what most people picture. It was cardiovascular pharmacology, fluid dynamics, the physiology of shock and how quickly it can tip. It was simulation labs, where I practiced intubation on a mannequin until my hands moved without thought, until the sequence existed somewhere below the level of decision. My clinical rotations put me in the emergency department, and I knew by the end of the first week that this was where I was supposed to be. I was fast, and I was calm, and I was good at the puzzle of it. Read the room, read the patient, read the numbers, form a picture in the time it takes to inhale. My clinical instructor pulled me aside at the end of my second rotation and told me I had a gift for triage. I thanked her, and I went home, and I filed that away, right next to weigh with people, and I kept working. I earned my ACLS certification the winter I was 24 through the American Heart Association. I completed it on a Saturday in December and drove home in the dark and made dinner and did not call anyone. The following spring, I received a written commendation from the department head for a pediatric intervention the letter described as demonstrating exceptional clinical judgment under time pressure. I put the letter in a folder and the folder in a drawer. I never told my mother about either one. She had never asked. Not once in all the years I had been working had she called and said, "What did you do today?" Or, "What are you certified in?" Not a single question. I had learned, somewhere around age 22, to stop offering information that was consistently received with a polite and total blankness. Not cruelty, blankness. You stop setting a table for a guest who does not come. Daniel finished his residency in general surgery and joined a practice in Bloomington. He was good at what he did, genuinely, and I respected it. His wife, Courtney, was kind and warm, and when she described my job at parties, she said she works at a hospital too, which she intended as an opening, an invitation for someone to ask more, but which functioned in practice as a ceiling. Daniel had a lake house on Lake Monroe by the time I was 28, and a son named Cooper, who was 7 years old and full of the specific confidence of a child who had never been really scared. The party was on a Saturday in July, the kind of afternoon Southern Indiana produces with a reliable generosity, heavy and green, the air thick with heat and the smell of sunscreen and charcoal and lake water. Daniel had invited maybe 20 people, colleagues and neighbors and friends from different chapters of his life. I drove down alone and arrived a little after 2 in the afternoon. Cooper was already at the dock with 2 other kids, running the boards with his arms out, living the precise and reckless life of a 7-year-old at a lake house. He was not wearing a life jacket. I noticed it the way I notice things in the emergency department. I saw it, assessed it, calculated the distance from the dock to the water, thought about his size and his swimming ability, which I did not actually know. I thought, I should say something to Daniel. And then I did not. He was right there on the dock with his friends. I was the aunt, arriving late, and there is a specific social cost to being the person who turns a summer party into a safety protocol. I set my bag on a lawn chair and told myself someone would notice. That calculation sits with me. My mother arrived around 3 with her friend Sandra, who had driven down from Indianapolis. Sandra was polished and easy, the kind of woman who actually listens when you talk. My mother moved through the party the way she moved through every room, warm and comfortable and at the center of things. She was in a cream-colored linen blouse, a glass of white wine already in her hand, laughing at something Sandra had said as they came across the grass. She brought Sandra over to where I was standing near the coolers. She put her hand briefly on my arm, which was her version of "I see you," and she turned to Sandra with the particular warm smile of an introduction. And she said, "Sandra, this is Lauren, our family babysitter. She has always been wonderful with kids." Sandra turned to me with genuine interest. "How lovely. How old are the children you watch?" I counted. 1, 2, 3. "I'm a registered nurse," I said. "I work in the emergency department." "Oh," Sandra said, and her face shifted, recalibrating. "How fascinating." And then something across the yard had caught my mother's attention, and the moment finished itself, and I was standing there with a drink I had not opened. I looked at my grandmother's watch. It was 3:14. I decided I would stay through lunch, maybe until 5, and then I would make an excuse about an early shift. 90 minutes. Maybe 2 hours. I could do 2 hours. I had been at the party for exactly 4 hours when I heard it. Not a scream at first. A silence. The specific silence that happens in the moment right after something goes wrong, when the brain has registered the information, but the voice has not caught up yet. 2 full seconds of nothing. And then Courtney's voice, high and cracked, and not a word, just his name. Cooper. I was already moving before I consciously decided to move. I do not remember the grass under my feet. I remember the dock boards, uneven and sun-bleached, and then the water, which was cold for July and darker than I expected. Cooper was face down about 6 feet from the dock, not struggling, already still, the way a person goes still when the body has stopped its argument with the water. I reached him in seconds. I got one arm under him and turned him and called his name and got nothing back, and got him to the dock edge and pulled him up onto the boards and checked for breathing. Nothing. The ACLS sequence is not something you think through when you need it. After enough repetition, it is something your body does, while some part of your mind stands slightly to the side and watches. I found the correct hand position, heel of my right palm on his sternum, fingers laced, arms straight, and I began. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. The dock was hard and uneven under my knees. I could hear my mother behind me, and the words she was saying were a prayer, low and continuous and steady. I could hear Daniel saying Cooper's name over and over, at a pitch I had never heard from him, a pitch I hoped to never hear from anyone again. I could hear Courtney on the phone, her voice controlled in the specific way that people go controlled when the alternative is to fall apart completely. I did not look up. I kept my hands where they were. I kept the rhythm, and I caught my grandmother's watch in my peripheral vision. Without planning it, without choosing it, I found the second hand, and I used it. 30 compressions was approximately 1/2 rotation. I used it as a metronome, as a fixed point, as the one thing in that chaotic and sun-bright and terrifying afternoon that was moving at a predictable rate. The instructor at my ACLS certification was a man whose last name I have mostly forgotten, but there is one thing he said that I have never forgotten, which he delivered not with emphasis, but with the flat certainty of someone stating a physical law. Firm compression, consistent rhythm, don't stop. He said it simply because simple things are what you can hold on to when everything else is noise. He was right. On that dock, with the wood digging into my knees and the sun hammering the back of my neck, and my brother's voice cracking apart somewhere behind me, I held on to that. Firm. Consistent. don't stop. My grandmother once sat across from me at her kitchen table when I was about 14 and said, "Caring for people is the most serious work there is. Anyone who tells you different has never been the one doing it." Not dramatic, just direct. I thought about her face on that dock. I thought about 31 years on a cardiac floor. I thought about the second hand, the one I was counting, the one that had been on her wrist for decades, moving through its rotations, indifferent to the situation, perfectly reliable. 4 minutes and 22 seconds. The count lived in the watch, and in my arms, and in the boards under my knees, and in the part of my brain that does not let numbers go. Cooper coughed. It is not a dramatic sound. It is small and wet and incomplete, and it is the most important sound I know. He coughed once, and I turned him to his side, and he coughed again, and then he cried, which is the most beautiful thing a child can do. And I put my hand flat on his back and felt his chest moving, and I let out a breath that I had apparently been holding for 4 minutes and 22 seconds without knowing it. The ambulance arrived 4 minutes after that. The paramedics came down the dock efficiently, and I gave them the handoff. Age 7, unwitnessed submersion, estimated duration under 30 seconds. CPR initiated immediately. 4 minutes and 22 seconds total. Return of spontaneous breathing approximately 40 seconds ago. No visible trauma, responsive, and crying. They wrote it down. One of them looked up from her notepad and said, "Are you a nurse?" "Yes." She nodded in the particular way that means, "I know what you just did." Daniel was standing at the end of the dock. He had seen all of it. He was a surgeon. He understood timing and technique, and he understood exactly what 4 minutes and 22 seconds of high-quality CPR on a 7-year-old requires from the person doing it. He was looking at me, and I could see him working through something, some recalculation, some revision of a story he had been telling himself for a long time. He opened his mouth. He closed it. There was nothing to say yet. I understood. At Monroe County Hospital, Courtney went back with Cooper immediately. Daniel stayed near the nurse's station, speaking to the attending physician in the low, direct voice of one doctor to another, which was appropriate. I sat in a plastic chair near the entrance to the ER and let my heart rate come down, which took longer than usual. My scrub pants were wet. My grandmother's watch was still on my wrist, still moving. Sandra arrived about 20 minutes after we did. She found my mother near the admissions desk, and they stood together, two women who had known each other for 40 years, holding each other up the way people can when they do not need words. I watched them from my plastic chair, and I was glad my mother had Sandra. My mother came over and sat next to me. She looked undone in a way I had not seen before, a way that made her look older and also somehow younger at the same time. She reached over and took my hand and held it for a moment, and I squeezed back because she was my mother and she was frightened, and that part was simple. Then she stood and walked back toward Sandra, and as she reached her, she said, in the soft and unguarded voice of someone speaking before they have thought the words all the way through, "Sandra, this is Lauren, our family babysitter. Thank God she was there." I heard every syllable. I counted to 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I stopped, because counting was not going to change what had been said. And I had learned a long time ago that the moment to contest a word is not always the moment the word is used. Sometimes you have to let the room do it for you. I was still in that plastic chair when Dr. Marcus Webb came around the corner. I had met Dr. Webb 3 weeks earlier, on a Saturday when he came in to cover a staffing gap at Monroe County while I was picking up an extra shift. He was the chief of emergency medicine there, and he was the kind of physician who reads the room in the clinical sense of that phrase. He registers how the nurses move, whether they second-guess themselves, whether their hands know what they are doing without being told. We had worked 2 traumas together that day, exchanged maybe 40 words, but I knew from the way he passed work to me without over-explaining that he had taken a measure of me, and found it accurate. He came around the corner with his clipboard and his white coat open and his reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, walking with the slightly preoccupied purpose of someone between tasks. He was not looking for me. He was not thinking about me. He simply happened to raise his eyes and see me sitting in that chair. He stopped. "Lauren?" "Dr. Webb." "You were the one who did the CPR on the child?" "Yes." "How long?" 4 minutes and 22 seconds. He looked around, not for effect, just the way you survey a space when you are about to say something you want people to hear. My mother was 2 feet to my left. Sandra was beside her, a couple near the vending machines, the automatic doors at the far end. He said it in the same register he had used in the trauma bay 3 weeks ago, which was the register of someone stating a fact. She saved that child's life with perfect technique. And then, as an afterthought, a professional observation he was tossing into the air with no particular destination. "You should be in my department." He walked on. He had no idea what had just happened in that hallway. He did not know what the word babysitter had meant in that space 30 minutes before. He was not making a speech. He was not coming to my defense. He was a physician who had observed clinical competence and named it, because naming good work is something good physicians do reflexively, the way my grandmother used to adjust a drip before she was fully aware she had seen it needed adjusting. That reflex, with no theater in it, was what made it impossible to dismiss. My mother turned slowly. Sandra looked at me, a different look than the one at the party. That one had been polite and mild. This one was a recalibration, a full, quiet reassessment of the conversation she thought she had understood. I looked at my mother. My mother looked at me. The word babysitter was still in the air between us, and it had lost all its function. It had been a label, and now it was just a sound. The hallway was quiet, the way things are quiet when something is shifted, and everyone in the space knows it, but no one has said so. I did not speak. I have held people's hands in their last moments. I have talked frightened children through procedures that hurt. I know when words are necessary, and I know when they are not. And in that hallway, they were not. The second hand on my grandmother's watch moved through one full rotation while we stood there, and I counted it, every second of it, and I let the silence be as long as it needed to be. Have you ever stayed quiet, completely quiet, while the truth was already being louder than anything you could have said? Daniel called me 4 evenings later. I was at home in my scrubs after a shift, making dinner without much enthusiasm, and I almost did not pick up because I was tired in the specific way that a 12-hour ER shift on a Thursday leaves you tired. I picked up. "I didn't know," he said. "I know," I said. There was a pause, not an uncomfortable one, a pause with weight in it. "You were better at biology than I was. High school. I remember thinking you understood the concepts faster. I remember noticing it and then just, I don't know, not doing anything with that." "Yes," I said, because he was right, and because there was no point in softening it. "I'm sorry it took this." This was not a dramatic reconciliation. It was 2 adults with a long, complicated history and a nephew who was going to be fine, speaking honestly for maybe the first time. Daniel is not a cruel person. He had slipped into the role of the one who was going to be important so early and so smoothly that I genuinely believe he had never once examined it. Examining it now, at 36, was not nothing. I will take honest and late over dishonest and timely, every time. My mother texted me 3 days after that. The message said, "You are my daughter, and I am so proud of you." Nothing else. I wrote back, "Thank you, Mom. Next time, say it out loud." She did not respond right away. When she did, she wrote, "You're right." 2 words. I read them 4 times. I know what they cost her, because she is my mother, and I have been watching her my whole life. 2 words from someone who does not revise herself easily is not a small thing. Some things repair in pieces, and the piece you get today is not the whole repair, but it is a real piece, and you hold it next to the wound, and let them both be true. That is the grace I am choosing. Not because everything is resolved, but because I am 29 years old, and I have learned that the energy it takes to stay angry at someone's blindness is energy I could spend on something that saves lives. About a week after the hospital, Cooper drew me a picture. He is 7, so the drawing is what 7-year-old drawings are. A stick figure with yellow hair on a flat brown shape that I understand to be the dock, and a second, smaller stick figure in blue that I understand to be the water. The yellow-haired figure has both hands on the small one. Below the drawing, in handwriting that is still working out how letters are shaped, it says, "Aunt Lauren saved my life." I put it on my refrigerator, next to the letter my grandmother received from her department head in 1987, the one she kept in a kitchen drawer for the last 15 years of her life, the one that uses the words exceptional and irreplaceable, and that her family had never read, not once. 2 women, 31 years between them. 1 letter in a drawer, 1 drawing on a refrigerator. The same story. I went back to work the following Monday. I put on my grandmother's Timex and I drove to the hospital and I walked through the triage doors and I did my shift. I held a woman's hand at 4 a.m. when she was afraid and set in 4 on a man who was bruising badly and helped a teenager through his first panic attack with the same low, steady, certain voice my grandmother used in that hospital room when I was 8 years old, standing in the doorway, counting the seconds. Competence does not ask for permission. It does not require an audience. It does not need to be announced or introduced or toasted with champagne. It exists in the simulation labs at midnight, in the certification courses nobody knows you took, in the commendation letters nobody knows you received, in the dark and the cold and the sun-bright chaos of a dock in July. It is patient. It is extremely patient. It just does what it does, year after year, until one day it does it in the exact moment and the exact hallway where the person who once filed you in the wrong folder is standing 2 feet away, and everything that was used to make you smaller, every casual word, every introduction that got your category wrong, every polite blankness where a question should have been, becomes visible for what it always was, a misreading, a failure of attention, a word that had never, not for one single day, described you. In that hallway, in Monroe County Hospital, my grandmother's watch kept ticking. If someone in your life has tried to reduce you to what you do for them instead of who you actually are in the world, I want to ask you something. Is your watch still ticking?